We're with Mark McCafferty, CEO of Premiership Rugby, at Rugby Expo 2012 at Twickenham. People have been talking for the last couple of days that this is a great time of opportunity for rugby. How do you see that opportunity, and how does that translate to your world of top-level professional clubs?
Well, I think the opportunity is that, people are very well aware of the fact that the Rugby World Cup is coming to England in 2015, and then the following year the next Olympics in Rio is the first time that Rugby Sevens then gets incorporated into the Olympic movement. So I think those two things are really quite seminal points in time for us that we need to focus on. So that's the nature of the opportunity. What we do with that opportunity is going to be determined by the next 3-4 years, and I think there's lots of plans underway, lots of things that people want to achieve, but one of the things I want to try and emphasise a lot is I think quite a bit of the infrastructure is already there, and it needs reinforcing, and it needs building upon, it needs adding to, but let's not, to use an old phrase, let's be careful at least about pulling up the plant, looking at the roots to see whether it's growing, because I think there's a lot of good that is done in the community game right across the country now. I think a lot of the time people just need a bit more resource, a bit more help, great volunteers coming in, a few more coaches and so forth, but let's build on that, and we can make it a huge success. And if we do that, then the game will grow with it. The youngsters will come in the game, and most importantly of all, hopefully the youngsters will stay with the game through into their adult life as well.
Given the number of overseas players who are starring in the Premiership, the World Cup is a fantastic showcase for most of your clubs as well.
Yeah, it is. The number of overseas players, just to put it in perspective, is now a lot less than people think. So the English qualifying players in the Premiership now are numbering typically around 70-72% of all of the players. However, there is a fantastic contingent of overseas players, and I think people will really warm to those during the 2015 World Cup as well. But we want to see England win it, so they want to see them starring, but maybe playing a supporting role behind a great England team, hopefully. And that that's the other aspect of it, really, Kevin. I think one of the things that we have to do within the professional game is to inspire people. We all have our role models, we all have our heroes and heroines through the Olympics that have just been completed. That's part of our job, along with the England teams, is to create those heroes people can look up to and say, boy, I want a piece of that, I want to be able to play that game, I want to be able to go watch those games and be part of that sport. And that's the other side of the opportunity of 2015 and 2016 as well.
Now, inevitably, that's been at the core of the discussion at Rugby Expo over the last couple of days. What's the experience here been like for you?
Brilliant. I think it's just another sort of indicator of the degree to which the profile of the game is growing, both at the professional and at the amateur level. And I think Rugby Expo's found a really neat formula there of a chunk of time spent on those two elements of the game, both of which are very independent. The professional game is never going to thrive unless there are players coming through the amateur ranks, developing, learning their trade, and then moving, if they're good enough, onto the professional game. And similarly, as I mentioned, the professional game needs to act as a bit of a showcase for the amateur game in terms of attracting people into the sport, not only to play, as I say, but to watch, to volunteer, to help, and that a lot of that inspiration will come from seeing the stars in action, and that's our part of the bargain, if you like. That's what we've got to deliver. And I think Rugby Expo's found a great way of combining those two and spending time really getting stuck into the issues of how do we make both parts of that brilliant game better.
Well, leadership is so important to success in sport, of course, but in the wider world of business. I wonder what, in your view, makes a great leader, and what the world of business can learn from sport, and vice versa. Drawing on the experience I've had of working for people who I regard through my career as great leaders, I think you've got to be able to assess with your team, what the priorities and what the challenges are. And it sounds straightforward, but really being able to do that very clearly and get a very clear picture in your own mind of what the priorities are for the business is crucial. The way you then communicate that is then the next step, in my view, and people write very complex strategic documents sometimes to try and summarize how a business should be moving forward. I think the communication of strategy comes down to, unless you can condense it into a few key bullet points, and unless you can motivate and inspire people to say, yes, I want to be part of creating and delivering that, then it won't be an effective strategy. So some of the most effective leaders I've seen have been those who can condense quite complex issues but very clear priorities into very simple and straightforward words that people can be inspired by and say, yeah, I want to be part of the team that delivers that. And I think that translates pretty well over into the sport as well. I think the only thing from my experience in sport is it's probably in general more complex from the point of view of the number of different stakeholders there are. So trying to move things forward, trying to get things done, trying to advance things is perhaps more difficult in sport for two reasons. One, because I think, as I mentioned, the complexity of the stakeholders, the number of people who either have a legitimate say or want to say in what you're trying to achieve. And secondly, because the media attention is relentless, and therefore a lot of the things that you do get immediately played out in the media, which makes it more challenging. I think the great thing about media coverage is it gives a fantastic profile to the sport, all sports. And the downside of that is that it's very difficult to do things that are sometimes slightly controversial, let's say, or difficult, without it being immediately, in the sort of public glare. And that's just something you have to live with and wrestle with. But that's a dimension which I think most businesses don't have. I think even multi-billion-pound businesses don't get the kind of relentless media attention that sport does. So even though sport is a smaller business, because of its profile, I think making progress sometimes it has to be done in a different way. And so I think great leadership in sport is being able to take those lessons, but also manage it through the complex stakeholder group and manage it through the media. Sometimes we get it right, sometimes we don't.